How's everybody doing today? I certainly hope you're doing well. It's time for another edition of Story Time. This story was developed and figured out in about 45 minutes. I like to let people know whether or not it's a true story. It is not a true story. It's a story in which I created. The name of the story is called Operation Misty. Let's go ahead and begin, shall we? There was a 59-year-old by the name of Hans. Hans had dual citizenship. He was a citizen of the United States and he was a citizen of Germany. You see, Hans, his father, used to be an individual that worked at the embassy in Germany on the behalf of the United States government. He was an ambassador. And when Hans was born, he was born in Germany. So his father was American, his mother was German. You see, for the most part, Hans was raised in Germany. But later in his years, in his late 20s, he came to the United States, in which he went to school, he went to college, and he was studying what is called electrical engineering. And then he started working for these companies in the United States, and he ended up being a translator, a business translator. So it's a lot different when you're a translator for just everyday communications, whether it be for court procedures or something of the like. But when you're a business translator, you have to really be astute when it comes to certain words that are not normally used in everyday life. Because in business, when it deals with contractual agreements, you have to be on your up and up. You have to be on your game. So, he was a translator for several years. He ended up getting a master's degree in electrical engineering. Then he went on to work for a company called Krone, K-R-O-N-E, in which he was at that company for a couple of years, and then he moved on to Siemens. He was with that company a couple of years. And before you knew it, because of the contacts that his father had, he was able to get a job at the Department of Energy in the United States, again having dual citizenship. He'd been working at the Department of Energy as a liaison between the United States and Germany, not only as a translator, but also as an electrical engineer dealing with the electrical makeup of this country, the United States, and all of the proper procedures dealing with energy, whether it be oil or gas or electricity, you name it, he was involved. So it was December 14th, you pick the year, and he was approached by the Department of State, in other words, the State Department of the United States, alerting him that there was going to be an exercise that was to take place in Breckenridge, Colorado. This exercise was going to affect about 900 people in a 21-block area in the heart of Breckenridge. But what was this exercise all about? Well, the exercise was going to deal with turning off the power intentionally for 21 blocks. 21 blocks in an exact square that would affect all these people, and just to see what would happen. Well, he wasn't really happy about that, because he was thinking to himself, why would the Department of State want to conduct some sort of exercise like that in the heart of winter, when it's colder than hell, when it's snowing profusely, when so many different lives could be at stake? Because after all, Breckenridge itself, the city itself, was created on March 3rd, 1880. The population currently at the time is not quite 5,000. But you see, a lot of people come into Breckenridge for skiing. A lot of people come in from other areas like Vail and Aspen. And so many visitors come in from all over the world, because Breckenridge is not only beautiful, but it does have a great ski resort. and great shopping, as well as other services. So months planning, in September and October, a fence was put up in the perimeter of all these blocks. And we're not talking about any fence, no sir, no ma'am. We're talking about a fence that was an electrical fence. All of the posts were just like this, 7 feet tall. And every 8 feet there was a camera posted on it, inward, to monitor all of the area within the square of all these blocks where the electricity was going to be intentionally turned off on December 14th. You pick the year. So Hans was like, he was kind of dumbfounded. He was thinking to himself, now wait a minute. Seeing that he was an electrical engineer for both corporate and residential earlier in his life, he knew that if you turn off the electricity intentionally and you do not turn it back on, then lives will certainly be at stake, and people will do the weirdest things for the weirdest reasons when they're in a pickle, when they're in a bind, when they have no other choice. So here it is, December 13th, you pick the year. One day before this exercise is to take place, Hans is shaking his head. He doesn't like the idea. He's fighting with the State Department, trying to figure out, why would you create such an exercise against all of these innocent people and these visitors from other countries and these visitors from other towns? For what? For what reason? He couldn't understand it. And for the most part, the Department of State told him to shut his mouth. You be quiet. Not only did he have to sign a NDA, which is a non-disclosure agreement, he had to sign an STS, which is sworn to secrecy agreement as well, that he would never talk about the exercise before, during, or after. The exercise was to last 31 days. Yes sir, yes ma'am. Try to imagine, try to put yourself in the shoes of the people in Breckenridge, of all of these blocks that will be affected. Try to put yourself in that position. What would you do in the dead of winter if the power was intentionally turned off? How would you react? December 14th, 8:08 a.m., the power was turned off. Not only is the power turned off, at all of the roads interconnecting into all of these blocks, they have armed guards with all of these automatic metal protectors, if you get my meaning, to keep the people in, not out. Within all of these block areas, you have these high-rises that are 13 stories high that have all of these businesses down below, and so many people live above the businesses. Right. So not only is that a residential facility, it's also a commercial facility. Not to mention all of the other houses and or businesses within those block areas. So here you have a fence that has been constructed months in advance around the perimeter. An electric fence, 7 feet tall, with all the cameras posted to monitor the people within this area. By 8:10 in the morning, all of these calls started coming in. Why is the power off? All of the businesses started to call. Why is the power off? And they are reassured that they are working on it. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, 15 hours go by. People are starting to panic. Why is the power off? It is starting to snow profusely. Please remember, ladies and gentlemen, that your cell phone charge is only good for about 16 to 18 hours, maybe 24 at best. So once your cell phone goes down, if you don't have a charge, it's not going back up. So as it became early in the morning, more people were calling in. The next morning, 24 hours later, on December 15th, at 8:08 a.m., the calls were becoming less and less because those charges on those phones were becoming dead. Oh my, what to do? Businesses could not conduct business. Their computers were down. They couldn't run everyday sense of commerce. The ATMs were not working. There was no way to get cash, to buy milk, to buy food. There was no electricity. But you see, a lot of the people that lived in the homes in this perimeter, they had generators. But the people in the apartment complexes of the high-rises did not. December 16th at 8:08 a.m. Calls are no longer coming in. People are panicking. They truly are. They're veering out into the streets and they're trying to get away from this situation. They're trying to go to the roads. They're getting in their four-wheel drives. They're trying to get to the roads to get out, but they can't get out because there's armed personnel at every single entrance. And it is snowing, boy. You talk about snow. It's coming down. This goes on for days and days. The people are being reassured by the authorities that everything's going to be just fine and that they're working on it. Well, before you knew it, people started setting their furniture on fire to stay warm. It was becoming a very ugly scene. It sure was. And on December 21st, there was a snowstorm that was coming in that was going to dump 21 inches of snow. It was going to be pretty nasty, right? High winds, almost like blizzard. And again, you had these various homes that had generators. They had power, but the people in the high-rises did not. There were other people that were get together and they started setting things on fire in the street. And everything was being monitored by all these cameras that were all posted up on this fence within the perimeter all the way around all these blocks. They were also being monitored by satellite. They were also being monitored by drones. Everything was being calculated, tabulated, figured out, how people would react, how these people would react of the upper echelon of life. But you see, the people in the high-rise, those individuals were the people that would work for the other people that were so well-to-do. So here you have a clash of, for the most part, you have a clash of diversities financial. You have the people that aren't so rich and all that stuff trying to compete with the people that are rich that have the generators. So some of the people actually left through the emergency exits of the high-rise to go to where the light was. Now you have a bigger problem. Because you see, in the state of Colorado, there's a thing called the Make My Day law. In other words, if you encroach on somebody's property, they can smoke you and nothing's going to happen. Because you're encroaching on their property. If they feel threatened or they feel that their safety is at stake or their property is at stake, once you cross that line, buddy, it's on. And that's exactly what was happening. But did the police come? No, police didn't come. This is an experiment that is being conducted by the Department of State, buddy. But who knew about this? Well, Hans knew about it. Because he's working directly for the Department of Energy. Also, the mayor of Breckenridge was notified about this well in advance. The power company was notified about this well in advance. All of these officials were notified about this, and they too were forced to sign NDAs and STSs, sworn to secrecies, that they're not to talk about this before, during, or after the experiment. I tell you what, this snow is coming down so much. And all of these different homes that have the generators to stay warm and put light in their homes. And it gives them some sort of power so they could charge up those phones. One by one, those homes were going dark. Because guess what, ladies and gentlemen? You need fuel to run generators. If you don't have the fuel, and you can't get the fuel, your generators are going to not work because they're going to run out of fuel. And that's exactly what happened. You see, the Martin family, they were perched up on a hill. They could go on their property and look out in their backyard, panoramic view of all of Breckenridge, and they could see that it was an exact square where all the electricity was off. They could veer off to the west and see, whoa, the resort is on. They'd look over here, they'd see all these other lights on, these other homes, panoramically all the way around. But you see, the Martin family, they were getting really worried about this because their generator is going to go off any minute. And I tell you what, you talk about snow, you wouldn't even believe it. This snow was coming down, buddy. So Mr. Martin had to make a decision. See, Mr. Martin was also a translator. He was a translator in business for the Russians. Yeah, he was. He was a business translator, just like Hans. But did Hans and Mr. Martin know each other? No, they didn't know each other. No. He was just one big fat quinky-dink. That Mr. Martin was a translator for Russian business. But you see, he did most of his work at home via the computer. So as his family has light, because he had the generator going, and it was very hard to get to his property because he had gated, he had all the security and all that, but guess what? If you don't have electricity, you don't have any security. So the Martin family has to make a decision. You had Mr. Martin, his wife, and his daughter, who was 21 years of age. And under his calculations, he figured, even though it's snowing, and it's just nuts, he figured it would take about 6 hours to walk in the snow to get to the perimeter of where the light is. Now you got to remember, ladies and gentlemen, here it's been days and days and days and days without power. People are trying to get to the roads, and they're being met by armed guards that are not letting them pass. And telling them, if you try to pass, you will be taken out, and it won't be to lunch. This is terrifying. It is terrifying. More and more people are getting together. They're setting furniture on fire. People in the rooms of the high-rises, they're also setting things on fire in their own rooms to stay warm. All the stores are closed because you can't do anything anyway. Everything is done electronically. You can't get fuel. Everything's done electronically. You can't get to an ATM. People are starting to really, really panic. But this one night, it is snowing so hard. I mean, it is piling up very quickly. The Martin family decided to get a rope, a tent, a tarp, one shovel, snowshoes. And Mr. Martin tells his family, we got to do this. Because if we don't do this, we're going to freeze to death up in here. So we got to do this now. So as their generator went out, all the lights go out. They already had their things together, right? They got to veer out. He needs to veer out to save his family. So he's going to walk in damn near a blizzard. He's going to get to that perimeter. He's going to somehow, some way, he doesn't know that there's a fence there, but he's going to find out. It's just the way the beast works, buddy. But you got all these cameras there to alert the authorities of what's going on. Him and his wife and his daughter, they suit up, They got on their snowshoes. They're trekking down the hill in which he lives. He's trying to figure out where to go. It's early in the morning too. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning. It is coming down. You talk about cold. You don't even know what cold is. The wind howling, carrying on. Really thick snow. Oh man. Not a happy sight. So as he and his family is going down the hill and they're walking, there's other things you got to contend with in Breckenridge. See, Breckenridge is in the middle of the wilderness. So now you have to contend with those nocturnal creatures called wolves, coyotes. That's all right. Mr. Martin has a metal protector of his own. He's not dumb. And as they start tracking for hours and hours, his daughter and wife start complaining how tired they are. The snow is just blowing in their face. And, oh, you talk about cold, you don't even know. It's not like you can just spark up a fire in the middle of the wilderness when you got, several feet of snow on the ground. It's not going to work out like that. So as he and his family start walking towards, sun starts coming out and it starts clearing up a little bit of blue in the sky. It's becoming light. It's about 7 o'clock in the morning. He and his family come to the edge of that perimeter and they notice a fence. He's never seen a fence like this before in all his life. This fence is made up of these steel rods. And every 8 feet there's cameras on it. But guess what? Because of the snow, because it snowed so much the night before, snow is all over the lens of the cameras, so the cameras are blind. Good thing, good thing. But he gets up to this fence and he goes to touch it. He has gloves on, so it's not going to affect him. Doesn't see a problem. But there's no way to scale the fence because it's just like this. It's not made of wood, it's steel. And it's a hell of a lot taller than he is, and his wife and his daughter. And here it is. Comes about 8:30, 9 o'clock, and he hears this. He knows what that is. It sounds like somebody is hunting. And Mr. Martin starts screaming at the top of his lungs. He's like, "Hey! We're over here!" What's going on with that? Are these people going to hear him? He doesn't know where that shot was. He doesn't know where that came from. And guess what? It happens again. And it's echoing throughout the canyon. And he and his wife and his daughter start screaming as loud as they can scream, "Hey, we're over here, help, help!" And 2 men come in with these vests on. They are hunting. They sure are. They are hunting. They come up and they see them there and they're screaming. And they're, "Oh, thank God, oh, thank God. Please help us. We haven't had power for days and the authorities are saying..." And the people just look at him. They just stare at him. But they're not staring at the Martins. They're staring at the fence because they too don't understand what this fence is doing in the middle of the wilderness. And this fence is brand new. It sure is, right? But here's a good thing, ladies and gentlemen. Along the perimeter of the fence are a bunch of trees. Of course, you're in the middle of the forest. So Mr. Martin has a brilliant idea. He needs to figure out a way to get to the other side. How's he going to do it? He can't scale the fence. It's an electric fence, too. The good thing is the snow is on the cameras, so the cameras can't see what is going on. So that is a good thing for now. Because as the sun rises higher and higher, even though it's cold as hell, that sun will provide enough heat to melt the snow off the lenses of the camera, in which the authorities can see what's going on. So he doesn't have much time. Ladies and gentlemen, the fence is like this. There's a tree sitting right here. There's several trees that are parked right up against the fence or close to. And there's a branch that is just like this. Right? Mr. Martin has an idea. He's going to take that rope. He's going to throw it over that limb. It is about 12 feet high. Takes him several times to do it. Right? He tells the people on the other side, the hunters, he says, listen, you got to help us. We just need to get to the other side to get some power, where I can make a cell phone call, where I can get on a computer, where I can communicate with the outside world. Will you help us? They're like, sure, we'll help you. He goes, I have this idea. I'm going to take this rope, I'm going to throw it over the branch. The rope's going to fall on the other side of the fence. We're going to tie the rope around ourselves, and you will pull us up to the limb, not quite to the very top of the limb, in which we will push ourselves off the tree and let go of the rope and be on the other side of the fence. And that's what they do. That darndest thing, isn't it? And Mr. Martin first sends his daughter. She didn't quite make it the first time around. She doesn't let go of the rope. She lets go of the rope a little bit too late, and she ends up on the other side of the fence, the same side that Mr. Martin's on. She got to do it again. Do it again. She hoists it around. He ties it up real snug, got it over her shoulder. The people, the hunters, are on the other side. They're pulling like this, right? She gets up so high, and she pivots herself right up off the tree. She lets go, and there she is on the other side of the fence. Good job, good job. So now it's time for his wife. His wife is kind of petite, right? So she too, they lower the rope down a little bit. She ties her up around the waist or around the shoulders. Here you have the daughter. You got the two hunters. They're over there, they're pulling. They get her up, not quite to the very top. She kicks herself off the tree, lets go of the rope, she's on the other side. Mr. Martin does the same, in which the two hunters take the Martin family back to their house, where they have electricity. Mr. Martin pleads with them and says, listen guys, my name is Mr. Martin. I'm a translator. I've worked with the Russian government. I've worked for a Russian business. I've worked for the embassies. I've worked for this. He goes, I got money. You can't imagine the money that I have. You can't even imagine. You can't even fathom how much money I have. But I'll tell you right now, I will give you $5,000. And I don't have $5,000 in cash on me right now, but I give you my word. And all I got in life is my word. I will give you my word. I'll give you $5,000. Use a computer or a cell phone, anything. Because I got to figure out what the hell's going on here. Because something's crazy is going on. I don't know what it is, but I'm going to find out. Will you do that for me? They're like, absolutely. You don't have to give us $5,000. Because you see, the hunters, they make tons of money themselves. They're an excavation. Bigger money, right? They just do it out of the kindness of their hearts. He gets up on the cell phone and he calls one of his Russian pals. Works in Washington, D.C. He goes, man, something crazy's going on. This entire perimeter in Breckenridge, man, I don't know what's happening. They turned off the power. The power didn't come back on. We made calls. They reassured us that everything was going to be okay. Then we tried to veer out, and there's a fence, there's camera. I mean, man, what the hell's going on? Find out. Figure it out. Call me back. So his Russian friend did find out. He sure did. Through his channels. Because let me tell you something. Even these secrets are not secret. Because there's so many people that knew about it. There were so many people that knew about everything in advance. Months in advance. People, all the people at the State Department itself. All the people at the Department of Energy knew about it. The mayor of Breckenridge knew about it. The power company people knew about it. Even though they had to sign the NDA and the STS is a big deal. Thousands of people knew about this well in advance. So the Russian called him back and says, there's an experiment going on. And it's supposed to go on for 31 days from December 14th until mid part of January. Then they'll turn power back on. But ladies and gentlemen, let's go back to Breckenridge, to the area that the power was turned off. Oh yeah. What happens when the power is turned off and it's that cold? What happens? I tell you what happens. I tell you what happens. The water pipes burst, and that's exactly what they did. The night where the snow was falling, and all the snow fell down, the pipes was busting inside of the apartment complex, the high-rise. And what happened when these pipes burst? They sealed these people inside of their apartments because the water went flowing down the hallways and into the rooms. And as the doors were closed, the water froze. Consequently, you can't open the door. You can't escape. This is not good. Oh no. Because we still have over 2 weeks for this nonsense to carry on. Mr. Martin and his family are safe. They're going to be okay because of those hunters, because those hunters helped them. Absolute strangers they'd never met in all their life. People of equal financial worth decided to help them because they wanted to. Right? So Hans is up on the computers, and he's typing away, and he's trying to get all his contacts, trying to figure out why, who orchestrated this, who's responsible. Then some of the people that owned the houses up in the hills, they started to set their houses on fire to stay warm. Because in their minds, they believed in their hearts, if they set their house on fire, who's going to come to rescue them? The fire department. Wrong. You are under an absolute experiment, buddy boy. The whole thing is controlled. There is not going to be any firemen. There is not going to be any ambulance. There is not going to be any police. None. This is an experiment conducted by the United States government. But it didn't matter because these people started setting their houses on fire. Thinking that with these plumes of smoke, the fire department would come by itself automatically. Somebody would notify. Wrong. Wrong. These houses burnt to the ground. And after their house burnt to the ground, they had no source of shelter now. They're in a bigger pickle. And they too tried to veer down the canyons so they could penetrate and get to where the light was. Horrific situation. They believed, the Department of State believed that they were looking at over 150 people that are no longer with us because of one thing or another. There's still many, many days to go. I tell you what, Mr. Martin's getting busy. He figures out who's in charge of the Department of Energy. He also gets the department, the entire department associated under the Department of State that conducted this. Was it DARPA? Was it another outside agency? Who was it? Who was it? Who signed off on this? He found out through his Russian connections that it was Hans that signed off on this. He didn't want to do it. He was reluctant. But he signed off on it. So technically, he's going to be the person most culpable for all this nonsense. And because of what he had done to all of the people in Breckenridge, the Martin family. Mr. Martin had something in mind. He's going to pull the biggest favor of all time. More days go by. Here it is, January 14th at 8:08 p.m. All the power comes on in all those blocks. They send in all the service people to go in there. People of the paramedics, cleanup crews, right? They make a decision to dismantle this fence with all the cameras on. They're trying to tabulate how many people perished during this exercise, right? How many buildings were damaged, burnt down, a total assessment of the entire situation. And they're just making their little notes, you know. Oh, people are rioting, people are stealing, people are flipping out, people are setting their homes on fire, people are committing, right? Big old test. But Mr. Martin's got something else in mind. He sure does. Hans is alerted by the Russians that, oh, let's say they want to take him out, but not to lunch. So what does Hans do? Hans panics. That's what he does. And where does he end up? At the German embassy in Washington, D.C. See, Hans is going to take a flight in about 2 days to go back to Germany to escape away from the responsibility of this exercise that was conducted in Breckenridge. He doesn't know that Mr. Martin is behind it, but he does know through his Russian contacts that somebody's out to get him. That somebody is going to take him out, but not to lunch. We're talking a full contract. He skips over to the German embassy. He ain't got nothing to worry about. He's good. He's good. He ain't got nothing to worry about. Nobody can encroach upon the German embassy. Nobody. Not law enforcement, not the FBI, not the Marines, nobody, because German embassy, any embassy in the United States of another country is technically the sovereign soil of the country. Right? Yeah, that's right. Mr. Martin picks up the phone. He puts a call into somebody in Moscow. Somebody really up there. An old school KBG guy. But you see, the KGB was disbanded in 1979, I believe. So it's the FSB now, right? So he gets somebody way up there. And he says, listen, buddy, I got $150,000 for you to take this guy out, but not to lunch. What do you say? Make it happen. You're like, well, we'll make it happen. Right? So they notify Mr. Martin that Hans is in the German embassy. And that the chances of anything working out in Mr. Martin's favor is slim and zero. However, there is some sort of experimental drone that was under production. And they needed to test it anyway. So maybe they could make a deal and make something happen. Well, you see, the United States has these drones as well. But what are they? They're macro drones. They're the size of a fly. Huh. But that doesn't make sense. Flies aren't buzzing around in the middle of the winter, especially January. Not the last time I checked, but it didn't matter. Because this is how they got in. Right? Somebody opened the door. Even though you got all this high-powered frickin' security everywhere, you got all the cameras, you got the facial recognition, you got the biotechnology, right? So everybody can identify themselves and all that. You got these armed guards and everything, every kind of security you can dream of. As soon as that door opens, This drone flies in the door the size of a fly. Actually, 2 of them do. And they are on a mission. You see, these drones are complete with micro cameras that can be read remotely from afar. Here they have the blueprints of the entire German embassy. These little drones the size of a fly. They're flying down the halls, and because they're right up at like the roof area. Nobody's going to see them. Nobody's going to notice. Right? And they're looking all around. All they have to do is get facial recognition on Hans. And it'd be over, wouldn't it? But you see, here's the thing. A lot of these embassies, they have these invisible electronic sweepers. I don't know if you ever heard of this or not. That they put out some sort of pulse. Constant. That any sort of electronic bugging device or electronic anything kind of gizmo, it fries the innards of that electronics, even in the macro form, and it destroys it. It would be the equivalent of putting your cell phone in the microwave, putting it on, you know, turn the microwave on for 30 seconds. Yeah, it'll cook everything. So one of the drone flies gets hit with that down, right? The other drones, man, he's still looking around. They're going into room to room. They're going up underneath the door. They scan the whole area. They look for who they're looking for. They don't see him. The little drone flyer goes underneath the door again and goes the next one. 10 o'clock at night. The night before, Hans is supposed to get on a plane at 7:07 a.m. But it's 10 p.m. the night before. The very macro drone the size of a fly identifies Hans in one of the rooms. He's in the shower. And the fly is just sitting up on the wall, just waiting for him to come out. And he does come out. Hans takes his tie and his pants and his shirt and his shoes and he folds them up real nice, and he's got his briefcase there and has all his identifications, his passport, all that stuff. Lays it out over there on the ottoman. Jumps into bed. Goes down like this and getting ready to go to sleep. Mr. Martin is in constant communication with the Russians in Moscow to find out the up-to-date details on what's going on about taking this guy out, but not to lunch. Because he's got a vendetta. He sure does. Because of what Hans did. He's the only one he can identify by name to his family and all those people in Breckenridge, the city in which he lived. Oh yeah. You don't get him. An hour goes past. It's about 11:15 at night, the night before Hans is to leave in the morning to go back to Germany. That macro drone flies down right on his face, about right here. And the drone emits a mist right under his nose, literally. And as Han breathes in, he opens his eyes and lights out, buddy. The macro drone goes up underneath the door to find its way out. I'm Montagraph, and if you can't speak freely, you're simply not free.